Hi all, a very good morning. Are you guys able to hear me? Okay. I'm just waiting for the presenter access so that I'll be able to just present the screen. Hi all, a very good morning. So we had a little issues, technical glitches while we were trying to connect up. Okay, so we are already here now. So in the part of yesterday's session, we were able to look through the database instance, and once we had inside the database instance, we had a look at how we can work out with the snapshots. There are two different types, manual and the automated backups. So in terms of automated backups, it actually helps in to ease our life to automatically go back to any point in time recovery if we want to do so, or you can also go to the latest snapshot recovery which was done by the automated backup. And in terms of the manual backup, we also saw that it is up to us whenever we would like to create our own backup and store it across for any amount of time we would like to. Now automated backups come with a specific retention period that is being set across while we are trying to launch the database. So if the retention period is 7 days, so I'll be having only the backup of last 7 days. So we have that glitch there. So anyhow, we have got manual snapshots, which is all up to an individual's preference on how long he would like to save across this database for. So the part of today's section, what we are going to learn across is about how do we deal in case a disaster recovery happens or a disaster is going to happen. How are we going to help with the recovery? And in the second case, we are going to see how can we actually improve the performance of any RDS database system. So let's quickly move into the slide section. Yeah, before we move to the next part, one more most important thing that you have to always remember, if you're trying to restore the database either from an automated backup or from a manual snapshot, it doesn't matter, but the restored version of the database will always have a new endpoint. So in case if you are already having a web server or from anywhere else, you are trying to connect to your database, you will have to update your endpoint. And talking about the little bit on encryption. Encryption at rest is supported for MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, PostgreSQL, MariaDB, all of the databases, but this is available only for the database of the higher sizes. You will not be able to see the option of encryption which is available. If you have remember, it was grayed out in our case because we were trying to use a part of database for the free tier. If it is ahead of free tier, like if I have a database size of like M1 large something as such, then I'm all going to get this portion of encryption automatically enabled, and I'll be able to see whether I want to really opt for it or not. And encryption is usually done using the AWS Key Management Services, that is KMS. And once your hard disk data is encrypted at rest, the underlying storage is also encrypted, as are its automated backup, read replicas, and the snapshots. So if your database is encrypted, then all the snapshots, whether it's a manual or whether it's automated, whether it's a read replica, everything gets automatically encrypted. And if you already have a database instance on which the encryption is not enabled, then it is really difficult to get any existing instance to be encrypted. For that, you have to go ahead and first take a manual snapshot and then start migrating the data into the new one. So it's a little pain point to go ahead and encrypt an already running database instance. Now, talking about the disaster. So we all know that yes, disasters can happen. So what can we do in this specific case? So this is the reason databases are being designed in a point with multi-AZ concept. So we all know that Amazon is really working hard to make the things better. So in every region that we already have available across the world, there are minimum 2 availability zones, which means if even one of them goes down, the other would be still available to serve the data. So they are trying to create this multi-AZ concept. So now database, whenever we are going to launch, usually it is part of a single availability zone, and we do get an option of multi-AZ. So what happens in the multi-AZ? There are 2 different copies of my database that gets created, right? So if I'm trying to create in the US East 1A, so here the terminology of naming is little different. So usually I have 6 availability zones in the US East 1, that is North Virginia. So let's say I'm trying to create the database in US East 1A, and when I say it to be a multi-AZ, it can automatically create one other copy in the US East 1B or 1C or 1D or 1E or 1F, and then there will be 2 copies of my database. This is a web server. Let's say the people are trying to connect towards to my web server from the load balancer, and the load balancer is connected to 3 different EC2 instances, and these instances are actually talking to one of the database in the multi-AZ concept. Now whenever we are going to choose for the multi-AZ concept, you will have one of the database as a master and the second one as a slave. So here all the connections would be first redirected to the master. In case let's say one of the availability zone goes down, so the other one would be still available for me to serve the connections. So I don't have to update any endpoint in these web servers. It automatically makes all the transactions with the standby database. So the now standby will become a primary database in this case until this comes up. So this is how the multi-AZ concept is going to help us. So even if one of the availability zone goes down, automatically all the transactions are being redirected to the another database which is in separate availability zone. Now whenever you create a multi-AZ database, all the replication between the master and the standby database is automatically taken care by Amazon. We don't have to worry anything in terms of replication, or how is it going to happen, how is the data is going to get synchronized. Everything is being taken care by the Amazon. And even the endpoint, I don't have to change anything as such. automatically, if this database goes down, these web servers will start communicating with the one that is in the standby database. So the multi-AZ concept is really more about for the disaster recovery. So what happens in the multi-AZ? Multi-AZ allows you to have an exact copy of a production database in another availability zone. AWS handles the replication for you. So when your production database is written to, all the writes will automatically be synchronized to the standby database. Now, in case if you're trying to have any planned maintenance for the master database, or in case if there is any database failure, or in case if there is any, are you guys still unable to hear me? Rahul, Divya, Shiva, are you guys able to hear me now? Divya, are you able to hear me now? How about you, Shiva and Rahul? Are you guys able to hear me? Divya, can you just drop the connection and rejoin again? Because same was problem when I initially connected up. It was just trying to reconnect for a long time. We'll just wait for a minute for her to join back. Okay, so I guess we have Divya back. So Divya, are you able to hear us? Yeah. So we were just discussing about the multi-AZ concept of our RDS. What does it do and how does it help us? So multi-AZ actually allows you to have an exact copy of your production database in another availability zone. So we usually have minimum of 2 availability zones in each region. So wherever I go and put across the RDS as a multi-AZ, automatically 2 copies of my database will get created. But unlike the S3, where I have multiple copies of the same object, I'm not sure which copy I'm going to get connected to in the backend. If it is a S3, let's say I'm trying to use Tokyo region, which has got 3 availability zones. So moment I'm going to store a object on the S3 standard, automatically 3 copies of my object will be created in the 3 different availability zones. And whenever I'm trying to access an object, I'm never sure which availability zone I'm trying to access this object from. But in case of multi-AZ RDS, usually there will be multiple copies, but it will be in terms of which one will be a master copy and which one will be a standby, right? So we always connect to a master database until unless if there is any problem with the master. When it goes down, only then the standby database is a place where the connections will automatically redirect to. So as we just looked in one of these examples here, so if the master goes down, only then automatically these connections are going to get redirected towards the standby database. And we don't have to worry about the synchronizations, the replications, everything is taken care by the Amazon. And in event of any planned database maintenance or any database instance failure, or if the availability zone failure is going to happen, Amazon RDS is automatically going to fail over to the standby so that the operations can resume quickly without any administrative intervention. So we do not need to have any administrator to take care about this. Automatically the things would get redirected towards the standby database. Now yesterday, if you remember, we were having one point called as clusters. Now what does happen in the clusters? So you can basically define your own cluster here by having a multi-AZ database. So now let's say I have chosen 2 different subnets. So here we actually have something called as subnet groups. Now, if I go down and say I want to create a subnet group, I'll just say test subnet, and in this again I'll just give you same. So currently we have the default VPC here, and then it is going to ask me what all availability zones would you like to include. Let's say I just want to include one E here and then one F. I'll just say add subnet. So these are the 2 subnets that I would like to go ahead and put across, or you may also select one more if you want to. Right, so you can put across any number of subnets. So for now I'll just keep it simple by putting across 2 subnets, and then I'll just say create. So this has now created a subnet group. Yeah, so we just created a test subnet group. So by default, one of the subnet group with the name default will be always available. So we just created one of them with a test subnet which has got 2 availability zones. Now if you remember, when we were trying to launch a database instance, let's try to do the activity part here. Here I'll say create a replica in different availability zones. So let's pick up for multi-AZ option, and then I'll just go down here. I'll just give some random name. We are not going to launch anyway. We're just going to check out what are the options we are going to get across. Here, now if you see the first portion where we see the network and security, you're also able to see something called as subnet. So here we can actually go ahead and select the test subnet. So when I select the test subnet, automatically it is going to deploy it in 2 different availability zones, and that too I have selected which availability zones it should be. It should be only one E and one F. So those are the two availability zones in which I would like to have my this database to be a part of, right? So the subnet groups actually help you with a choice of your own availability zones in which you want to keep it across. So when we are going to learn about the VPC section, we are going to learn in detail about what is a subnet, what can we do more about it. But for now, remember, Amazon has created one subnet per availability zone. So if it is a Mumbai region, I have two availability zones, which means I will have two subnets. If it is a North Virginia region, I'll have 6 availability zones, which means I'll have 6 subnet groups, right? So here I get a choice of which subnets I want to put it across with. So in this subnets, I have defined which are the availability zones which are going to be picked up. So this will be 1E or 1F. Now, there was another point that we were trying to discuss about it yesterday, that is cluster. Now, when we know that it is actually going to launch two databases in two different subnets, that is 1E and 1F. Now you want to define which one would be a master. So that option we actually get to see it in the cluster. So cluster is the option that you will be able to see it here. So when you go down here, you will be able to, the moment you are going to create a multi-AZ database, it is going to show up the cluster here, and in which you will be able to select out which one is going to be the master and which one is going to be a standby. So you also have an option to define out that the database in the availability zone 1E is going to be the master and the 1F is going to be a part of standby database. So those are the things that we can actually do with the clusters and the subnet groups here. And remember, multi-AZ is only for the disaster recovery. So if something happens, yes, multi-AZ is required for the clusters. So multi-AZ is all about disaster recovery only. So if something happens really for my database, in that case itself, I'm trying to use the multi-AZ. So if I want to improve the performance of my database, multi-AZ is not going to help you. So for performance improvements, you need something called as read replicas. Now, what is a read replica? So that is the next thing that we are going to learn across. Before that, multi-AZ databases are usually available for SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and MariaDB only. It is not available for Aurora, because Aurora automatically comes with multiple copies. So the moment I'm going to create Aurora, 6 different copies of the databases are going to get created. So that is something specialty about Aurora. So we are going to learn in detail about Aurora as well again. So in terms of the database section, where we have 6 different database engines, that is SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL Server, Postgres, Maria, and the Aurora. Out of this, multi-AZ concept is available only for 5 of them, that is SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL Server, PostgreSQL, and the MariaDB. So Aurora DB is not part of multi-AZ databases because it is little special, and the moment I'm going to launch the Aurora, it is automatically going to create 6 different copies. So that is everything managed by Amazon. And now talking about the performance improvement in terms of the read replicas. So we all know that whenever the database is being created, after that we start storing the transactions. Now let's talk about one of the leading e-commerce websites. So let's say I go ahead and order in the flipkart.com something today at 10 in the morning. Once the order has been placed, I would be usually curious about when that order is going to be delivered. So what is the status of that specific order? So we usually go back to our account and we usually keep checking whether the status of the order has been changed or where is it being struck, if it is so. And if it is at a delivery point, who is the person who's going to give me delivery, or at what point of time I'm going to get this product delivered on so and so date, right? So once the right transaction has been completed, like once I place the order, the next activity will be always I'll always keep a track of it, right? So whenever I'm going back to the same e-commerce website to check out the status of the order, it is like I'm trying to hit a read request onto my database in order to retrieve the information. So every time I open the order details, it is going to put across a read request to find out the details about my order. Now imagine 10,000s of transactions happening in 1 hour on this e-commerce website like Amazon and Flipkart, and out of those 10,000, at least minimum of 5,000 users are going to come back at the same time to check out what is the status of the order. So you have 10,000 transactions in terms of writes that are happening per every hour, and you are adding upon 5 to 6,000 of read transactions every hour, right? So your database is being heavily used in terms of reads and the writes. So can we improve the situation of this database? Yes, we can improve the situation. What we can do is we can actually create a read replica. So what does a read replica do? I'm trying to create a same copy of my main database, and I'm trying to put across as a read replica. So in read replica, I'll be only able to read the data from this. I'll not be able to write any data to this. So now whenever any user is trying to come and read through the database, any transaction to read through from the database, they will be automatically they'll be always fetching the data from the read replicas instead of the main database. So the main database, I'm just utilizing it for the write purposes, and the read replicas are the place from where I'm going to go ahead and read the data. So this is going to improve the situation for me very heavily. I can also have a read replica of the read replica, but yes, of course, the synchronization is going to take a little while, so I'll have to watch out for the latency in case I am going to have a read replica of the read replica in this case. So what can we do with the read replica? It actually allows you to have a read-only copy of your production database, and this is achieved by using a synchronous replication from the primary RDS instance to the read replica. You can use read replicas primarily for the very read heavy database workloads. Now sometimes it also happens that I'm working with a management team, and my management team will always ask me what are the number of transactions that happened during the last 1 minute, what are the number of transactions that happened in the last 10 minutes, what are the number of transactions that happened during the last 1 hour. So I'm also going back and hitting on the database to find out all this data. So basically I'm trying to read the data, I'm trying to put some select queries, trying to fetch the data and find out how many orders were placed, how many were cancelled, how many were put across for the replace of a repair or something as such. So I would like to find, my management team wants me to find out. So if I'm trying to hit the main database and get all these details, it's like I am trying to consume the CPU cycles of this. So what usually people do in the real time is they create a read replica of the exact production copy, and the size of the read replica is usually much more heavy than the normal database, because the normal database we are just going to utilize it for the write purposes, and the read replica are something where I'm going to put across all my queries like my management would like to give me across in terms of getting the data for generating analytics, right? So we can actually use a read replica which can actually improve the performance of my databases heavily. And the read replicas are currently available only for these three, that is MySQL Server, PostgreSQL and the MariaDB. Aurora, as I said, it's exceptional. We do not need anything as in terms of multi-AZ or read replicas, but in terms of read replica, Oracle and the Microsoft SQL Server also do not give any support. So we are unable to put across the third-party companies softwares like Oracle and the Microsoft SQL Server for the read replicas. And few important points to remember here: whenever you are going to make use of read replica, remember it is just used for scaling the database up, which means in order to improve the database, it is not for the disaster recovery. If you are thinking about the disaster recovery, you always needs to go for multi-AZ concept. And in order to have a read replica, you must have the automatic backups turned on in order to deploy a read replica, right? So if you want to really have a read replica, you must have to mention the backup retention period with at least some number of days, minimum of 1 day and maximum is 35. So you have to mention some value in that backup retention period, so which will enable the automatic backups, and that will help me to put across it read replica. You can have up to 5 read replica copies of any database. So maximum is the 5 that we can create, and we can also create a read replica of the read replica, but just that you have to watch out for the latency, and each read replica will have its own DNS endpoint. That is really important. Now if I have 4 read replicas like as shown in this figure, all these 4 will have different endpoints. And you cannot have a read replicas that have multi-AZ. Here, this point actually means, let's say I have got a primary database and a standby database in terms of multi-AZ. I will not be able to create read replica for the standby database. However, it says here in the next point, you can create a read replica of multi-AZ source database, not the standby database. So we will not be able to create a read replica for the standby, but for the primary or the source database of a multi-AZ, we will be able to create a read replica. And read replicas can also be promoted to be their own databases, and this breaks the replication. So if you think you want to go ahead and create a read replica and now you want to deploy some other application and you want to use the same database here, so you can actually go ahead and promote this read replica itself to be a own database. But whenever I'm going to promote it to be a own database, which means I'm enabling the write transactions as well apart from the read transactions, right? So this is going to actually break the replication. And the read replica in second region is actually possible for the MySQL and the MariaDB, but not for the PostgreSQL. So you can actually create the read replicas in another region as well. So this actually gives a very good flexibility. Let's say my company's headquarters exist in US and we are working from the India. So as per the Indian government rules, we should have all the data to be residing in the servers which are in India itself. So now that the Amazon has actually opened up the data centers in the India, in the Mumbai region, let's say I start deploying everything on the Mumbai region, but since my headquarters are still in US and they would like to generate some reports or something as such, it sometimes becomes difficult because they have to send their request all the way from the US to Mumbai region. And since the regions are a little far, there could be a latency in order to access the data. So what you can do is you can always create a read replica copy of a database if it is a MySQL or a Maria and into the different region itself. And so that your management, wherever it is sitting, they will be able to directly connect to the database which is in their region. That is a read replica copy, and from there they will be able to easily generate the analytics. Now talking about the one last part about the RDS here. So in terms of RDS, what happens? Now let's say if I want to increase the size of database, or in case if I would like to restore the database, or if in case if I make some changes to the existing database, so it is actually going to take a little while. I cannot have my RDS up and running all the time. I need to get it down for a little time. I'll create a snapshot, and then from that snapshot I'll try to create a copy which is of higher size. Or in case if I want to make some changes, let's say there's one table in which I would like to add extra column, and then we need to set up the indexes or something as such. So once we do all those things, we need to again restart the existing database. So again it is going to have a downtime, right? So RDS is not so easy, and usually have to use a bigger instance or need to have a read replica and all also to improve the performances and do all those things. But when we talk about the NoSQL DBs like Dynamo, you do not have any downtime, and it is basically a push button scaling. So if you think you want to increase the size of a database, if you think you want to improve the performance of a database, it is just a push button scaling, we can tell it about, right? So just go to my button and say that okay, I want to increase the size, I want to increase the capacity. You can just do it within fraction of seconds while the database is still live running in the production environment. So that is possible with NoSQL DynamoDB, but not with the RDS, right? So that is the difference that we are going to see across how the DynamoDB is actually going to offer me push button scaling, where I can scale my database up without any downtime. So any questions here on the RDS part of the section? Yeah.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, in replica, if we have any temperature issues on servers, it will going to replace an immediate situation. Or can we wait for a while from Amazon? I mean, in our own builded servers, we can make it own decision. But in the AWS side, we have a established servers. We have a machine images, right? What is the decision going at our end or from Amazon?
No, I didn't get your story.
Actually, yesterday we got a issue like servers. We got a high range of temperature. At that moment, we have make down all applications and servers.
Okay.
At this kind of situation, in AWS services, I mean servers, what we have chosen mission images, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. At this moment, is this any dependent on AWS administrator, or is this entirely will be looked after by the AWS administrator, or in our point?
No, since it is a heating issue, right? Like it is not
Yes.
in our, because it is where the Amazon is trying to handle their data centers. So they have well equipped data centers which have got furbishing with the air conditioners and other things. So I don't think that will be a issue from our side. They have to manage about it because the physical devices, whatever are there, whatever happens is whatever is happening with that, they have to manage it. And that's why we are getting a option to select a specific size. So we'll always be able to see whether the CPU utilization is going high in terms, let's say if it is going to heat up, eventually my CPU is also going to get heated up, right? So in that case, I'll be able to get a notification in terms of the metrics, which is going higher, which is going lower, or if in case if I really need to improvise the size so that the CPU stays better. So we will have the control over the parameters in this way. But really, if it is hitting up very high, then Amazon has to really take care about it because it is at the physical data center which is getting heated up.
Okay, at that moment, do we need to actually communicate with them, or they will directly proceed about the what they in that hard situation? So instead,
Usually they will automatically do it because in our
okay,
terms we will get a notification in terms of CPU utilization because if the
yes,
system is heating up, CPU is surely heating it up, right? So our CPU utilization will anyway hit high. So it is an indication that the size of the system that I have actually given is not enough. I may need to improvise the situation from my side in terms of changing the size of this
yes.
system or the virtual machine. Let's say it's T2 micro, maybe I'll have to move to T2 medium, one level higher, so that
Okay.
I can also check whether it can be done. Yeah, sometimes, as you said, it might not be a system problem. Some processes may multiply by itself inside a computer. In that case, I'll just try to reboot it or restart it and then check out if the things are going fine.
Okay, at that moment we need to make it down our instances, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay, this was the situation happened yesterday in my plan.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. And talking about the read replicas, how do we create or configure it? It's very simple. When we have a database instance here, when we click on the instance actions, we do get an option to create a read replica, and then it will start showing up here itself in this instances section. And here we will have one parameter, yeah, replication role. So this will say whether it is a reader or whether it also has a write role, right? So if it is a read replica, it will be just a reader, and if it is a normal database, it will also have a writer option along with it. So I'll be able to write the transactions to it. So that is the option we'll get into the instance actions where we will be able to check out how to create a read replica. And we are going to discuss about the Aurora again. We'll come back after at the sixth part of our database here. So we are going to discuss about the Aurora in detail. We are going to see why is it so special. So we are going to look back at RDS section again in a little while. So now we'll move ahead to the next section, that is about a DynamoDB. So as we all know, DynamoDB is basically a NoSQL database from the Amazon. As such, in the market, we do have different. One second. Yes, so the role of events is like I want to schedule some events. Like I want to take a manual snapshot every day or maybe after every 7 days. If I want to go ahead and create an automatic event out of it, so that is where I'll be able to make use of it. Like if you remember, we have something like CloudWatch events for the virtual machines of EC2 where we can actually do some activities. Similarly, we have the events predefined inside this database section. So automatically I'll be able to do those activities of picking up the manual snapshots or doing it automatically for me. Now talking about the DynamoDB. DynamoDB is a NoSQL database offering from the Amazon. Similarly, in the market, there are a couple of other NoSQL databases which are available. So if you talk about the Mongo or Cassandra DB, they are actually available in the market for the direct usage and they are open source databases. So Mongo and the Cassandra DB may also soon come up as a part of NoSQL DBs in the Amazon. That was what the was announced in reInvent this year, that Mongo and the Cassandra DB may soon come up into the NoSQL offering in the AWS cloud. However, there is only one at this point of time, and if you want to use a NoSQL database, that is DynamoDB. And now if you want to use Mongo or Cassandra, you will have to launch your own virtual machine, that is EC2 instance, and inside that you can go ahead and install it and you can make your own MongoDB or Cassandra DB, which can be used as NoSQL. And if you want to directly use a database as an offering, you can come down to DynamoDB. Now DynamoDB is fast, flexible, NoSQL database service for all the applications that need consistent single-digit millisecond latency at any scale. The beauty of NoSQL databases is any query you put across, you will be able to fetch the data within milliseconds. It is because they have a very typical model of setting up the data behind the scene, where we actually create a lot of indexes, and whenever we are going to hit the request is going to check out on any of the indexes and retrieve the data for me. Right? It's fast and flexible data model, and the reliable performance makes it a great fit for mobile, web, gaming, ad tech, IoT, and many other gaming applications. Now, in case if you remember the games like Candy Crush, where we actually make a Facebook login, so what happens in this case, whenever I complete a certain stage, immediately I am able to see the pop out saying that this is your score and your friends stand out at this level of score. It gives you a ranking comparison with the all your friends on the Facebook who are playing the same game. So all that basically happens with the help of NoSQL DBs behind the scene. So it is actually very fast. The moment you're going to complete the stage, along with your score, it is actually trying to display your friend's score, your rank, and compare it with them, and then also give you a comparison rank, who stands where, right? So DynamoDBs are specifically used in those cases, or any NoSQL databases are specifically used where mobile, web, gaming, ad tech, IoT, or many other applications are involved. And as such, we learned just now that it's a single digit millisecond. So the moment I'm going to put across any query, I'm going to retrieve the answers in single digit millisecond latency. What's so special about DynamoDB? So whenever I'm going to pick up a DynamoDB in AWS Amazon Cloud, automatically the data is going to get stored on the SSDs. I don't have to worry about it. And whenever the data is being stored, it is automatically spread across three different geographically distinct data centers. Here it means the three different availability zones. So if I'm trying to store the data in North Virginia, which has got 6 availability zones, automatically it is going to get stored in three different availability zones. Then we have the consistent reads and the strongly consistent reads. Now, what is the difference between the eventually consistent and strongly consistent? Now, as we just learned that the DynamoDB is automatically going to create three different copies of my database. So in terms of eventual consistency, so whenever I'm making any update on any of the database, right? So consistency across the all copies of data is usually reached within a second. So it might take a fraction of second to replicate the changes from the one database to other, between one data center to other. Now, if I'm trying to again read the same portion, like let's say I have just placed an order on the Amazon, and if I try to immediately go back and say I want to check out my order details, sometimes it would take a little while to be available. Sometimes that's very rare, but yes. So in terms of eventual consistency, it does take a fraction of second to get replicated among all the data centers or all the data copies, we can say. And repeating a read after again a short moment of time will return the updated data. That is for the best read performance we can pick it up. Now when we talk about the strongly consistent reads, a strongly consistent read returns a result that reflect all writes that received a successful response prior to read. So now if you want to immediately read after the writing that should happen, then you can actually go for strongly consistent reads, because in eventual consistent read it takes a fraction of seconds higher in order to get replicated across the data. But in strongly consistent reads, automatically the data is reflected immediately in all the copies the moment I'm going to make a write transaction. Right? So that is the difference between the eventual consistent and the strongly consistent reads. So there is a small difference in the time lag, I can say, in terms of the data getting updated in the different copies of availability zone. Now, on what basis are we going to be put across for the pricing in DynamoDB? So in terms of DynamoDB, we are always going to be priced in terms of the storage. So that is how much amount of storage that is I'm going to utilize across, and how many read capacity and the write capacity units I'm going to consume all the way. So read capacity and the write capacity units. So we didn't have this point in the RDS, right? So in RDS specifically, we choose a machine of a size, whether it's a T2 micro, whether it's a T2 medium, T1 large, M1 medium, something as such. But in terms of DynamoDB, we do not choose any machine here. We only choose how many read units would be required, how many write units would be required. So I have to specifically say the capacity on the flow while I'm going to create a table. So here we are not even going to do any installation of the database, neither any EC2 instance will be available behind the scene. I can straight away go and start creating a table. So let's get into the DynamoDB table part here. I'll go down to the services, click onto the DynamoDB section. You see here, I directly get an option to create a table, and then we can start adding the items, and then we can also query the items, and we can also start monitoring the table performance, how many connections are happening, whether the capacity units that I have put across are enough or not. So we can check out all those in terms of monitoring section here. Let's quickly go ahead and click on create table. So here in these terms, I straight away get started with the creation of table. Let's say I'm trying to go ahead and create the table with the name employee data. Now, as we all know, usually in any database, we will have something called as primary key. So what is a primary key? So primary key is basically the way of uniquely identifying a row. Now let's talk about this table, which is called as employee data, which has got these columns like employee ID, first name, last name, mobile number, pin code, city, and the date of birth. Okay. Now in this case, employee ID is the easiest way to find out a unique row. Let's say I want to find out a person with a psi, right? So it will be like I can have many number of psi in my company, but if it is this employee ID, I can uniquely identify, okay, the employee number with 1 2 4 5 6 7. If I want to find out the details, it clearly says what it is about Sai, and his phone number is so and so, he resides in so and so place, and he is from the so and so pin code, right? So I'll be able to easily and uniquely identify using the employee ID. So employee ID would be specifically called as primary key in this table. Now when we talk about the DynamoDB or any NoSQL DB, we have a primary key, but that is combination of a partition key and the sort key. Okay, so we have something called as partition key and a sort key. Now we also know that sometimes primary key can be a combination of two different columns, because let's say employee ID doesn't exist in this table, let's say. So now if I have to go ahead and say what is the unique way of identifying the data in this employee data table, so what I'll do is I'll try to make a combination of first name and last name so that it becomes unique, or maybe the first name and the mobile number, that gives me a unique result. So I can also have a combination of two different columns as a primary key sometimes. So we call it as a composite. So in traditional RDS database systems, we call it as primary key, which is just a single column, and we call it as a composite key. Right. So in this case, my first name and the mobile number, let's say, is going to make the combination unique to identify it in from the table. So that is in the normal RDS or traditional way of databases, we speak it as primary and the composite key. Now, when we talk about the primary key inside a NoSQL database, we have a combination of partition key and the sort key. So if I have only a single unique column, I call it as a partition key. And if I have two different columns, if I have two different columns as a unique way of identifying it, then we have called partition key and the sort key. So primary key is composition of partition key itself sometimes, or it can be a composition of partition key and the sort key as well, right? So it depends. Sometimes, right? So in this case, when we are trying to put across a table at the forefront, it is going to ask me for a primary key. So if I am going to have only one of them as a unique key, then I can just say here employee ID. However, if I would also like to add one more column, which is going to give me a appropriate result, so that the combination makes a fair enough. So I can give here, maybe let's say first name as a sort key. It's not required, but you can add. It's completely optional. If you want to add, you can, or if not, you can remove it across. Now for now, I'm going to remove this default settings. Just come down and I'll also remove this read capacity, write capacity. I straight away go ahead and say I want one read capacity unit, one write capacity unit for now, so that the cost of this table will be very cheaper, because we are not going to do much in these tables. So I'm just going to keep across one read capacity unit and the write capacity units, and straight away go ahead and say create table. That is it. So in order to get started with the DynamoDB, you just need to know what is the name of the table, what is the partition key going to be, or what is the sort key going to be, and how many read capacity and the write capacity units are required, and straight away you can get started with creation of the table. So you will see that this is going to take just few seconds overall. So currently it is in creating state, and the name of the table is employee data, which has got partition key and the sort key. I'll just re-log in into my account. Okay, there we go. My table is all set. I guess my just account was logged in from last 12 hours, so it just asked me to relog in back. Okay, so now my table is with the name employee data, which is active, and the partition key as we have selected is employee ID, and the sort key, which is basically helping me to get a unique combination here with the help of partition and the sort key. So sort key is going to be the first name, and the number of read capacity units we have put across is 1 for now, and write capacity units also put across as 1. So this is how we can get straight away get started with the DynamoDB. We are going to discuss in detail about this DynamoDB in the session from tomorrow, where we are going to learn how to start adding the data to this, how can we connect from an EC2 instance to this DynamoDB. So we are going to learn in detail about the DynamoDB in upcoming sessions. So any queries or questions from the part of the lab that we have done today? How about you, Divya and Shiva? Any questions or queries? Okay, we'll come down to the interview questions on this part, because usually what happens is until unless the people are not database administrators, they don't dig around a lot. They just need to know as a architect or as a developer, you know how the databases are configured in the AWS section. How do we connect to them using the software development kits? However, I'll just try to figure out what are the other interview questions on this part of database section from my other colleagues. So we'll let you know about this. So thanks all. Have a great day, and we'll meet again tomorrow at the same time.